did you launch him 80 feet in the air?
You told me to boat flip him!
I didn't tell you to launch him 78 feet in the air.
I flipped him in the boat, didn't I?
Send it to the moon.
I sent it! You said boat flip him!
Oh, yeah.
Do you fish? No. You know, people who don't fish think that fishing is lazy or boring, but it is the complete opposite. There are 100 little decisions to be made, variables to be considered, and you're never quite sure what made the difference. Did I cast too high, too far to the left? Did I reel it in too slow or too fast? Is the lure too shiny or too dull? Do I stay here or should I go over there? And you know it's not luck, but you do not know by how much. Because I am never disappointed out here, because I don't expect anything, because anything is possible. I can be hopeful out here, even in failure. Because I know if I just go out there around that tree, it might be different. Something might be different. Something I do might make a difference.
On my property, you didn't win in my yard.
Wait.
All of you.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Monday Night Live. This is episode 28. We have gone 7 months straight, 7 months in a row that we have not missed a Monday when we decided to start doing these live streams. This is absolutely crazy, and we're also approaching our 2-year anniversary. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started here. Our Patreon supporter of the week is Bob King. Bob, you just want a gift card to Jake's Bait and Tackle. I'll be sending that out to you in the next couple of days. Just reach out to me if I don't reach out to you first. On our Jake's live stream, the next one we have will actually take place on the day we uploaded our first podcast episode. So we're going to have a big shindig for that with a couple of guests already lined up. And then the last thing is, as always with these Monday Night Lives, you ask a good question, you win a gift card. That's how this whole thing works. So for everyone that'll be listening in, ask your questions away in the comment section and we'll get to them as we go along here. And without further ado, we got to bring on the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that basically runs the lake of Virginia, Billy Coles. Billy, how are you doing tonight, sir? Whoa, where is his screen? There it is.
Are you there, bud?
I'm there. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Have you been staying busy?
Crazy busy, bro. We're about to do a baby moon.
Oh, right. Yeah. And for people that don't know, is that something we can actually break on the show here? Uh-oh. Looks like we're having some internet problems, which always happens at the worst time possible.
I know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
That's weird. We'll see if it gets worse or better. So yeah, we're about to head out on a baby moon. So I'm about to go MIA from the phone for about 3 days, which is probably going to be super nice and needed. But dude, we're winding down, guiding's slowing down quite a bit just for the winter and kind of how the lake's fishing. And we'll get into that a little bit. And then we're just You there, bud?
Mm-hmm. I'm still here.
Oh, it's dropping like every second.
Are you on Chrome?
I am on Chrome. Should I switch out?
You could try to switch to Firefox if it's still an issue.
Would Safari be better than Chrome?
StreamYard does not support Safari. So that would be way worse.
All right, let's just leave it on this for a little bit, see what happens.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I'm not sure how much you heard, but just a bunch of baby stuff, fishing stuff, weddings are wrapping up, and
SpaghettiOs.
you try my phone.
You could try on your phone. You could pitch if you want to drop out and come back in. We could do that as well.
All right, sorry, everyone. Let's try that.
Groovy. So then while he's doing that, I'm going to be getting some more of the news that we were going to be talking about later on in the show. So this past weekend, we were at the Veterans Day tournament at Lake Anna, Virginia, which is I think it's the largest Veterans Day tournament that actually takes place in Virginia. They drew over almost 150 boats at Lake Anna. I think it was 146, if I am not mistaken, which is an absolutely crazy number of boats that they had on Lake Anna. I was actually fortunate and blessed to be able to fish with Matt of SB Fishing. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the boat with me. I had a lot of fun. We actually finished, I think it was 51st, if I am not mistaken. I think we finished up 51st, which honestly, for my first time, I have not fished Lake Anna from a boat in like 6 years. It's insane how long it's been. I fished a kayak tournament there 2 years ago for Northern Virginia Kayak Association. I don't really count that because it is a little different than a boat tournament. I didn't have a torpedo or anything, and I kind of just like dropped in at the upper portion of the lake and kind of went from there. But that tournament was absolutely amazing. And it really kind of proves the point that you can actually have a BFL caliber event on that lake. I know a lot of people were saying like there's no way it could be done. The marinas aren't big enough to hold all the boats. We had almost 150 boats. That's almost like a BFL pool around here. So the idea that lake couldn't hold it because of the marine size, I think that was kind of blown out of the water with that event. Huge shout out to Martin. That was an absolutely fantastic event that you put on. Really, really good. And if you guys didn't know, this is his last year of putting on that event. So Larry Martin, congratulations on putting on such a fantastic event. It was really good. And we're sorry to see you go. He's going to be passing the torch off to another organization next year. And hopefully that we can help out with that. I think it took like 22 pounds, if I am not mistaken, 22 pounds to win that event, which is remarkable for this time of year. The weights did drop off a little bit, believe it or not. I think it dropped down all the way to, I think it was like the top to break the top 10. If you had 12 to 13 pounds, you were doing all right and you would have been okay in that event. So regardless of that, because of the time of year too, I think people are going to be saying like it was the boating pressure. I mean, potentially it possibly could have been the boating pressure that did something to do with it. But I really think it was the time of year that really kind of created that issue. And then I had my last event of the year yesterday for the Antietam Bass Masters. We were up at Big Slack, and good God, does that place fish like the Ohio River? I came in third place in that bad boy with 5 pounds. It was insane. But what was fun is that was like the best Demiki rig bite I've ever been on in my life. You were literally I took the, what I like to use for my Demiki rig is I'll take the TRD Finesse and I'll use that as my Demiki rig bait. I like the size profile of it, especially for those smallmouth that are feeding on the really small bait fish that are up there. And dude, the bite was terrible. It was bad because it was like 48-degree water level. Like 48 degrees was the water temp on Sunday. But I think it took 8 pounds to win up there. Anyway, so overall, I finished the year out really good. Another third place. I think 80% of the tournaments I fished this year, I was in the top 10, top 15. So really pleased with that. But I'll be doing a breakdown of everything that I did in those tournaments during our Patreon live stream on Thursday. And then, we got Billy back in the house. Let's try this. Take 2. So are you there?
Whoa.
Oh, you look clear too. All right. The image looks way clearer.
Okay. I downloaded Firefox. So let's try that.
All right, let's try this. So I believe you left off with wedding stuff, and then you're going on sabbatical for a couple of days.
Got it. Yeah, so we're doing a baby moon. If for anybody that doesn't know what that is, or it's a new thing or whatever, but basically we're just going to disconnect for 3 days. No phones. Think like honeymoon before your baby comes.
Nice.
So yeah, we're going to go do that for a couple days and come back, and we got a tournament on Sunday, and couple guide trips before the tournament, and just a couple weddings left, and then the baby room set up, and I'm rocking and rolling, just working on training the new puppy and keeping the garage organized. So
it's that time of year. And are there any big tournaments? While you were gone, we were talking that they had the Veterans Day tournament at Lake Anna this past weekend that I got to fish, and they had almost 150 boat draw for that thing. It was amazing.
Wow.
But and the weights were like, it was like 23 pounds to win the damn thing still for that place, which I thought was incredible. But it was that fall transition to wintertime, and you could read if a quarter was on heads or tails in 30 feet of water. It was insanely clear. And I know that's some stuff that we want to get to today as well.
Yeah, it's been a weird fall for anybody that's in Virginia. again, I think I've said this on this podcast before, but I say it in life all the time. If you want to make a lot of money and not really have to do your job, just become a weatherman or a weatherwoman, because the computers don't know what the hell's going on. And I don't think the Aztecs knew what was going on or anything, because I'm in flip-flops today. And I had my Sims bibs on, but I just had a sweatshirt on. I was in shorts and a t-shirt 5 days ago. And then 3 days before that, I was in a full-on suit with winter gloves and a winter hat. So if we're confused and we have 2 different seasons of clothes in the closet, then, the fish are all over the map, which is what we're running into at Smith Mountain. And then on top of that, we have not had rain or any substantial amount of rain. I'm just going to spit out 30 days. So Smith Mountain, Thomas, I'm going to text you some pictures. I don't know if you can bring them up on that computer or not, but I went out today and kind of same thing. We're not 30-foot clear, but we're definitely in that like 10, 12, 14, maybe on the lower end. Like I'm seeing what's on the bottom on the last dock posts on some of the docks that I haven't seen the bottom before. And then we're really low. We're 792, almost 792 flat, which is 2.5 feet below full pool here, which is a lot. So it's been a weird fall. It's been one where, my Minnesota roots are going to come out in this podcast a lot, because we're going to talk about line size and downsizing everything and maybe trying some different baits, because you cannot really give them a lot of time to take a look at a bait. Otherwise, they're just going to peel right off. So
let's get into it. And then one question I did have for you before you sent me, or while you're sending the pictures, is this the worst drought this time of year you can remember?
Yes. And I was just talking to a buddy who's a fireman this morning too. And he was talking about how his fire department's doing fine as far as what they're managing or whatever, but a lot of fire departments are having major issues with random fires. I think one of the tournament directors for the CAT is a like forestry firefighter, and there was a big fire in Madison County. He had to go for a week, and it's still not out. So it's really dry, man. For any of the guys that deer hunt and stuff, I'm sure they're dealing with walking through dry leaves and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know that it's really been affecting the deer hunting, because I'm seeing some dudes catch some shoot some straight up hammer deer right now. But it's definitely been messing with the fishing a little bit.
I 100% agree on that too. So guys, what I'll do when he sends me the photos, I'll put them up on the screen here. But where did you want to start? Did you want to start with?
Yeah, let's talk fall. So I didn't hear you, but it sounded like you said you were fishing someplace like the Ohio River. That sounds like a blast.
The Upper Potomac at Big Slack, which is one of the biggest impoundments that you don't know of in Maryland, that you can actually fire a big engine up. And so think of a river that has been raised up by about 30 feet, but it's still the river. It's just swollen. And so you're basically you're just main part of the river, and you're Demiki rigging or Ned rigging smallmouth, except they're not 6 pounds. They're 1.5 pounds.
Yum.
That's super fun. Sucked. I got 3rd place out of all the boats there with 5 pounds. Like that's how brutal it was.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. 48 degree water level, 48 degrees. It sucked. I'd rather be where you're at. But I think some of the techniques that you might be talking about, like it was the best Demiki rig bite I've ever been on with those guys. No one else was doing that. Everyone else was Ned rigging and just doing the tube deal and stuff. And I got on with the Ned rig, but using it as Demiki style, and it was a lot of fun.
Hell yeah, that sounds awesome. Also, before we go forward, I just want to compliment this sick goatee you have going, bro.
No shave November, baby. Plus, the wife wanted it, and I said, "This is the only time
it's looking good, dude." I would just, when November's done, shave the sides, dude. Just leave it.
Yeah, I always thought it looked a little mangy, like I looked like a pedophile that owns an ice cream truck, so I never did it before. But
that windowless taco truck, yeah,
exactly.
Selling fishing tackle.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I'd be so good at luring 30-year-old men into the back of that thing if I did that.
We'll have to talk offline too.
About my facial hair.
Say it again.
About my facial hair?
No, about a couple of I was streaming some YouTube stuff today about a couple of the tournament guys talking about MLF and all that sort of stuff. I know you and me like to catch up on that stuff.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the drama is insane.
It's pretty funny, yeah. So, we can talk about that picture in a little bit. But for anybody that's on the live stream looking, that's Parkway Marina. normally you're not supposed to see the bottom as well. That floating dock to the top right is supposed to be almost up to the top of that retaining wall. So you guys can see right there, we're definitely down minimum. We're down 2 feet, maybe closer to 3 feet. But I'm seeing 10, 12 plus feet pretty much everywhere. I've ran up the rivers looking for any sort of stain, any sort of incoming silt. On a windy day, it's fishing somewhat okay back to what it is. But on a slick, calm day where it's still 65 degrees, 75 degrees, it's being a grinder for sure, which isn't bad. It's just a different type of fishing, and you just have to mentally prepare for that. So fall transition, let's just start there. It's going to be a later fall transition this year on the weather side, but we need to remember that fish, yes, they care about the weather, but they also run on light a lot more, and moon phase and all that sort of stuff. So I try not to get locked into like, what am I experiencing when it comes to the weather? I want to really keep an open mind on how far along are they, or how far behind they are, and kind of trying to keep on with them based on those transitions. And the clear water comes into play a lot with that, because it's not going to be your typical fall this year with bait balls in the back pocket, stained water, chucking a spinner bait, chucking a square bill. You're going to have to probably go to a Demiki a lot sooner than you normally would in the past 4 years, for me, at least in Virginia. So
I think one thing before we get in the fall transition, which is really interesting, is we always talk about fish that are clear water and what happens when you get that influx of dirty, silty water and it gets muddy. If you go from a regular visibility to ultra clear, what effect does that have on the fish? I mean, is it different than if you go out to, some place in California that's always gin clear where they're used to it?
Yeah. So clear water is relative, right? So I would say at Smith Mountain, you're talking about 8 or 10 foot clear is pretty normal for a majority part of the year, but 10 to 14 is not. So there is going to be a transition time on days where it is going to take them 2, 3, 4 days to get conditioned to that clear water. It's less of a light switch when stained water shows up, because obviously we're going, on a heavy rain, you can go from clear water to stained in 24 hours. So hold on a second. These dogs are barking like crazy. Rogue, go downstairs.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you always know going from clear to dirty, but not from clear to ultra clear, and how that actually affects them.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that everyone should note running into the ultra clear stuff is it's just going to become a tougher bite. So even downsizing on line, which is exactly what you want to do, it's more about treble hook size and light wire hooks and the color of your bait, the profile. This is a good time to maybe play with colors a lot. On like a cloudy day, you want to go with something that's a little bit more dull versus shiny, because they're going to get the best look that they've had all year at your bait, and they're already pressured from the entire year of fishing. So you really want to keep those kind of things in mind. It's really, really, really finicky on match the hatch, and moon phase, they're going to go more towards crawdad versus shad. Like, the fall to winter transition is a funny time, because this is the time of year when it should feel like you should be able to go down from 12 rods on the deck to like 7 or 5. Like, you're throwing a crankbait, you're throwing a jig, you're throwing a jerk bait. Top water's kind of fading away based on the water temperature. And it should just be basically, are they eating shad or are they eating crawdads? The bluegill deal bite, that's not really a thing. And so you really just kind of pick between those two. And then I rely heavily on the moon phase part of that. So if you get closer to that moon or that full moon phase, you're going to be switching to more, rock crawler, wiggle wart, brown crawfish style crankbaits, and throwing jigs, micro jigs, shaky heads, those types of craw baits. And then as we get away from that full moon, you'll see them switch back over to more of a shad deal. So chasing the shad in the ditches, out on the main lake points. Vertically fishing is going to come in just quicker this year, because from what I have seen, even just I went out today for a couple hours. If anybody saw on Instagram, I mean, I was way offshore when I caught that 4-pound smallmouth. I was in like 50 feet already. Not saying that you can't catch them shallow, because one of the guys last Sunday wanted in 8 to 12 feet throwing a shaky head and had 22 pounds. But the tournament weights are going low 20s to like 16, 15, 13, 13, 12, 10, and then everyone's catching 10 pounds because it's just really, really tough to put in 5 good ones. 2 good ones, more realistic. 3 good ones on a windy day, great. But I don't really see it Smith, unfortunately, this winter, unless we get some sort of weird cold snap and it pours and snows. I don't think we're going to see 27 to 30 pound bags like we have the last couple falls.
Compared to the winter time in a month and a half, how long are you spending on fish that you're seeing versus, like I said, like in the winter?
You mean like on live scope fish?
Yeah.
I'm moving around quicker. It's pretty straightforward. If you go to a point and they're still schooled, it's super strange, man. They're still schooled together in bigger schools than what they are in the winter. Like the winter time, you're seeing like 3-4 together on a point, and they're bigs, right? You know, you're talking they're 4-pound class fish. But I'm going to points right now, and I'm still seeing like September schools where it's like 15 to 17 together, but they're all 2.5 pounds. So it's almost out there fishing like September with water clarity and bait size that you have to match, but the bigger ones aren't as up shallow as they should be for mid-November. I mean, what are we talking about? Today's the 13th.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if you look at the extended forecast, which is strange too, I don't think we're under 60-degree highs for like 10 more days. So it's going to be kind of this extended, kind of dull, non-pressure dropping, another, you know, we're talking Thanksgiving time at that point. So we might not really get into true winter fishing into December. And I've only lived here 4 years, so maybe this is totally normal. And you're really not getting out of that winter bite stuff until December, but it's definitely been a weird one. And like you said, Anna's crazy clear, and you've kind of got a fluctuation to that. So, but jumping back into kind of the transition side, and this right now is specific to Smith Mountain, but I've talked to a few different guys at Bugs and some of the North Carolinas and stuff like that. And we're all kind of dealing with the same thing. The water's super clear. It's lower than it usually is. Is specifically if you are coming to Smith, let's say Thanksgiving's coming up, you're coming down in the next week and a half. I would say it's a really good idea to cover like an 80-20 type of scenario where you've probably got 80% of the fish, 80% of the fish and about like 20% of, am I saying that right?
You said like 20% of the water has 80% of the fish, and then 80% of the water doesn't have anything. Something like that.
Math was not a strong point for me. So essentially what you have is you have a majority of fish on Smith that are secondaries making their way back out from the early fall transition. We did have a really good solid, like 2.5-3 weeks of buzzbait, shallow crankbait, spinnerbait, little swim baits, chatterbait, stuff like that. It didn't last as long as I think most guys would have hoped, but we did have a good solid, we'll call it 3 weeks of run to the backs of pockets, hit as many backs of pockets as you can. But then like a light switch, it did just start switching from them transitioning out. And that was that first big cold snap that we got where I was wearing, you know, the full Sims gear, winter hat, winter gloves, like actually cold hand warmers in the suit. We did have a stretch of about 5 days where it was definitely in the 30s at night. So that transition has happened, but there are still a select few bigger pockets. So bigger main creeks, Becky Betty's, Gills, Bull Run, kind of the standard spots at Smith Mountain that hold bait almost 12 months out of the year. There's still bait in the back there. There's still big ones back there. You're just running into that water clarity issue of maybe they're rolling on your buzz bait, not really getting it, biting the tail off your swim bait, like kind of that annoying stuff where it's really frustrating to run back there because you know it's probably a big one that's eating the bait. So that's where we're at Smith currently. If you are coming, say like Thanksgiving, early December, do your dance to the Ice Queens or whatever you have to do. If we could get 4 or 5 nights in the high 20s to low 30s, I think that would be enough of a shock to the system to all of a sudden you're talking about secondary point and main lake fish are going from 2.5s to 4s. I think they're there. It's just a matter of you got to catch them on the right day. And like I said, those slick, calm days where you're talking 1 to 3 mile an hour wind, it's just it's slimy, man. It's put your head down and drag super slow and super light line and take your time trying to count rocks and hit as much structure as you can.
It's crazy because, and just this coincides with tournament fishing. And I heard this past weekend, more and more tournament organizations, Cat example, we're having tournaments now. But if you go back 10, 15 years ago, I don't really think that ever happened where you had tournaments this time of year. Nope. So it is new territory for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Cats, I mean, let's say I've done 3 years of the fall Cats. BFLs are out. You're done with BFLs at this time of year. And I get it. It's the deer hunting season and a lot of the fishing guys are just outdoorsmen and that's who you're kind of catering to. But I would so love to see elite events this time of year and like the real hammers, try to go when it's this just slimy grinders, man. It'd be really interesting to see kind of what tricks and how they're breaking down water and looking for fish.
The pandemic was interesting where I think you had Sandy Cooper in the fall, Lake Chickamauga in the fall, and then I think Lake Fork was late November when Patrick Walters like 200 pounds, some asinine thing he did at Lake Fork. But it was interesting that guys that are good at like Lake Chickamauga sucked because it was in the fall. And it's just, that's all he had to do is change the season up.
Yeah. It's definitely a hard time. I mean, I almost felt like we dealt with almost like a double turnover. Like it was definitely like the water got gross and grimy, looked like Diet Coke. Like it was definitely gross. And then it kind of went away quick. With that cold snap, but then we had another 6 or 7 days in the 80s and this water skyrocketed back up to almost 70 degrees. And it was like it reactivated the water and kind of that hard kind of bubbly, gross water, leaf decay kind of grossness, and then transitioned kind of into this. So I feel like I'm talking super negative about it and that it's a super like grinder fest out there, which it's just a different way to approach the fishing. And I will say it is going to get better. We just really need that cold snap. And so paying attention to your weather, I would tell you guys too, for example, just with today, they're basically on shad pretty hard, is paying attention to your 3 days before on your weather and the couple days before you go out can be really key this time of year because they're still eating the small forage that was born this year or born last year that's only 3 inches long. And those minnows that are schooled together, if there's 3 days in a row of 7 to 10 mile an hour sustained wind and gusts up to 15, whatever pockets are getting blown into, any sort of pockets that get sun for most of the day right now, those bait are running to those pockets about midday to get that last bit of warmth. That's another, you kind of do a reversal of springtime versus fall time, right? So in the springtime, fish are going to run to banks that are north wind protected that are getting most of the sun because that's the first water to warm up. Same thing in the fall. The shady banks are going to get colder first. So that bait's going to run back into those into those sunny pockets. They don't do it in the morning because everything's a new world level playing field every morning. But as that day progresses, if you have a bright bluebird sky, low wind, you will find those bait balls at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock before that sun gets really low, taking that last little bit of heat in on north protected and north facing pockets.
In the year 2023, with every brand has live scope and we have so much technology, how much do you play into watching birds, seagulls, cormorants, things like that?
Yep. That's funny. I should try to see if this text message pulls up. Let me see if it's got any info in here about where I was fishing today with Will. But Here we go. Let me screenshot it. Hold on. I don't know if this will show up or not. Is it pretty good about exposing, right?
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Tons of how deep?
Nope. Tons of seagulls. All right, so you gotta keep the old school stuff in your head. I know the electronics are awesome, and you could stare at live scope and basically run your boat into the bank if you don't pay attention and you don't look up. But keeping tradition and like your gut intuition going. I was up one of the rivers coming back basically at dusk and turned the corner going back to Parkway, and there was about 200 seagulls just sitting in the middle of the lake. So that's a dead indicator that there's bait that's high in the water column. And you don't have to stray very far from where those birds are to figure out where they're at, because they're not going to swim down to Craddock to enjoy the view and then fly up to the bridge to eat shad up there. Like, they are a dead indicator that there's bait, and they're a dead indicator that the bait's higher in the column. So keep that in mind as you run down the lake. Blue herring are still around. Loons are starting to show up at Smith Mountain. Maybe being a Minnesota boy, like, I love seeing the loons and like trying to talk to them and whistle to them and all that sort of stuff. But loons are a really good indicator to, like, yeah, at least this is how I view it, of like bigger bait. I think people forget how big loons are. They're actually a pretty big bird, and they can dive very deep and stay underwater for a long time. I don't know that they're obviously keying in on whatever they can get, but I wouldn't be surprised if a loon targets a 4-inch blueback as opposed to a 2-inch threadfin and 4 feet of water. Like, they're probably out diving for the deeper, bigger stuff.
I saw one on my live scope unpracticed last week for Lake Anna, a loon. I was like, Jesus God, those fuckers can go deep. I didn't realize those things can
stay underwater for more than 10 minutes. If I'd have to go, that's like Minnesota question. I'd have to look it up again, because I probably maybe am making that up, but I'm pretty sure they can stay underwater for multiple minutes. And they can dive like 40 feet. So yeah, and if you saw it on live scope, dude, I mean, they're like penguins. Like,
yeah,
they're not messing around under there. So yeah, birds, your herring are going to tell you kind of what's around up on the shallow side, but loons and seagulls are a great indicator of offshore bait. And keep an eye out too on the loons. Obviously, your seagulls are going to come up and dive, and that stuff's pretty basic, but keep an eye on if your loons are just swimming through the water or are they actively diving. And loons are a group bird. So it's not usually going to be like one loon. It's going to be like 4 to 7 of them. And if you see all of them diving, there is 100% there's a bait ball under those birds. And just kind of keeping that in your head. So the only other thing with transition that we could talk about, Thomas, I don't know if it's a possibility to bring up a map, or if you want me to bring up a map on my side, we can talk about like what to look for.
What type?
You can just bring up Navionics, or Navionics is fine. So as you're bringing that up, and we can work on transitioning to the bait stuff too, because no joke, I probably have 20 baits on this kitchen table. Is the fish are moving out to their winter stuff, but do not get ahead of those fish. There's a lot of times where if the bait is enough bait, they're not going to leave that stuff until late December, January, until they crush everything that's back in the bait. So what I mentioned on, for example, some of the bigger creeks that have bait left over, Gills Creek, Bull Run, Becky Betty's, Campers, like just kind of generic pockets that are full of bait, is we refer to these things as the ditch, or I call them like the scoop. Is you visualize a back pocket that would have had bait, say when the weather or the water temperature was like 65 to 69. It's a big flat. There's going to be this like first scoop of a dredge or a ditch where, as the water is cooling at night, the bait is going to go from being up in that shallow section to sitting in that first drop right at the back of a pocket. So if you can take the time and spend the time to find those and find bass with the bait, that is a type of spot that's going to be good for the next 2 months. It's just where they're going to stay. That's an ambush spot. It's a comfortability thing where those fish can transition back to deep water if they want to quickly. So if we get like a crazy cold snap, they're not sitting in that 8 to 12 foot range. They can go out to 25 and suspend. But that is a great fall to winter transition, is finding that first ditch that's got bait on it and has bass very close by, because it's something that will reload and that's kind of like, I would say, your fall to winter honey hole is going to be a back ditch that's got fish on it. So you can zoom in on right on those, Thomas, and we can kind of talk like what you guys are looking for. So for anybody that's not familiar with topography, your wider lines are going to be a shallower taper or a slower gradual fall into the depth. Your tighter lines are going to be really, really steep drops. And so the one that Thomas has pulled up here right in the middle is what we would consider to be a fall bait holding type of contour. What that is there's probably in the back of that area there's probably 40 yards of a very similar water depth, probably like 2 to 5 feet. There's probably some stumps back in there, some laydowns on the bank, and the bait is going to use that for warmth and just kind of getting out of being crushed by stripers out on the main lake. And what's going to happen now is those bass that were up super shallow with them are going to be right in that first little scoop. If you zoom in, Thomas, you can like roll the mouse over it, I guess. But this scoop right here on the right, guys, kind of looks like a tongue.
It's a weird one that you decided to go.
Yeah, little tongue to the side. That is where you're going to have your play of a small swim bait. A jerk bait is going to be almost clutch. Big glide bait this time of year into that, maybe drop shot with a longer leader line. But that's what you guys are looking for to find those last shallower bass. So like I said, going back to the 80-20, most of your bass are going to be on secondary, like pretty hard secondary points or main lake points. But at Smith specifically, you take the time to graph and look for those types of areas. That's where you're going to see your 3 to 5 big fish that are up, just finishing off those bait balls and those bait schools. So keep an eye on your electronics, look around quite a bit. If you do in the fall get a heavy rain, so let's say we get 3 inches of rain next week, those are also going to be phenomenal spots, because those are the first areas that are going to get stained. You're going to have water coming down from the mountains or coming down from the steeper parts in the back of the pockets that's going to stain those back areas. And now all of a sudden going from, hey, you got to keep the boat at 150 feet on live scope to even see if there's a fish up there, you can just go fishing and not have to worry about, they're going to be a lot more aggressive. They're going to be roaming around a little bit more. They'll search out that click of the jerk bait. They'll search out that click of the glide bait and be a lot more aggressive than what they have been the last couple of weeks. So that would be a key thing with the fall transition into winter. Once we get into that like mid 50 degree weather, I would tell you probably not weather, mid 50 degree water temperature. That bite's pretty much done. That bait's decided, all right, it's not getting warm enough for us to chill. We're just going to go suspend out over point. So we're at 61 degrees right now on my Garmin, which on a Lowrance is like 63. So we still, in my opinion, we still have probably 25 days, 30 days of that being a potential bite.
When do you start looking for the tighter contour lines?
Started today, just out of trying to keep an open mind. But I don't feel like I have to do that until low 50s. I feel like there's still enough that are on those transition line spots for like a crankbait, like a wiggle wart, or you can still catch them kind of like suspended on a swim bait. For me, the vertical wall stuff's like January, and that's when I'm doing stuff like tight lining, blade bait, A-rig, maybe weighting your jerk baits down, kind of those more sneaky things. Because Smith, although we have really good kind of contours in the lake, the steep vertical stuff, we really only have like 6 or 7 true bluff walls at Smith Mountain that are like, the boats in 60 feet right at the bank.
Because if I was a guy that has never been to Smith before and I looked at this map, it looks like the creek on the left. I mean, you look at some of those docks, those contour lines are pretty tight. That looks like a wintering area versus the creek on the right, as you've stated, is more of like that fall transition.
Yeah. So break it down on what's going to happen in the next 30 days is you're going to have fish that are probably still eating bait for the next, we'll call it 2 weeks. Let's say we get a cold snap. They're going to run out onto that secondary point. That's going to be your good transition time for chucking a jerk bait, fluke, something on those suspended fish, because they're still in active eating mode. And then what they'll do is they'll swim over to those docks, and that's going to be kind of like a wintering spot. That's going to be something where they can hang on the dock posts. They're going to get a lot of sun on that side of that bank, just to kind of stay warm. And then that's where you're talking, if the dock's got a 25-foot dock post on it, maybe you're throwing a spoon down the side of it or a Demiki rig or something like that. So I don't think we're there just yet, but that's the exact transition that I would think of as well by the time we're talking Christmas.
And I'm also glad you mentioned this, because this is a question I get a lot of times too. Just because you're looking for bait, it doesn't mean you're only specifically fishing the bait ball. It's when you find the bait, it's that generic area around it that will also play. I
don't really start fishing the bait ball until it gets colder, when the bass are like in it. You can see it on, take live scope out of it. I wouldn't fish in the bait ball until January. That's when I find them to be like, so the term I use is a void. So on live scope, it's super easy, and you can see it on 2D as well. But when you go over a ball of bait and you can see that the bait is getting the hell out of the way of something that's underneath them, or inside the bait ball, that's a dead indicator to me of a blade bait, a spoon, Demiki axe, a hair jig, something that you're dropping super fast into that void. And you can do it with an 8-scope on your 2D sonar. Also, you just look for your arches and your returns. But with live scope, that's what makes live scope super fun in the winter, is you can find a bait ball in 50 feet that's over a treetop and see 3 bass that are literally just like, they're not even eating the bait. They're just in the middle of the bait, and they just create a dark circle in the middle, and you can flick a Demiki over there, flick a spoon, and drop it literally right into where that void is and get bites pretty much all day long when you're talking about those depths in the winter.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And then, guys, as always, Jake's Bait and Tackle, you're going to be winning gift cards for asking really good questions. I haven't forgotten about you. So drop your questions now, and I'll make sure they get answered as we continue here. There's this really cool question by Brandon, which is, let me get it up here. Are boat shadows an issue with clear water? That's actually an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. I would say I originally would have said no, but I have had some weird experiences this year where I've had schools follow my bait back, and you would think that they would just disperse when they see the boat, where I've watched them on live scope, like stay under my boat for like multiple minutes. And I'm talking like you're out offshore, say in August, chasing schoolers with like a topwater, to where you get 6 or 7 bass to come in and you're in 50 feet casting up to a point in 10, and you watch 4-pounders follow your bait, and then all of a sudden they're literally under the boat, like 10 feet under the boat, and just don't go anywhere. So I would say I'm like out, like I'm dead neutral with it. Maybe not. I have this discussion with some guys all the time on like the crazy boat wraps and like sparkle versus dull boat wraps and all that sort of stuff. This time of year, and to answer your question about clear water, I would lean more towards yes. Yeah, on a bright sunny day, no wind, with less stain, your boat shadow could be going down all the way to 14 feet of water. And they're seeing just a giant dark blob come. But I also don't, and I'm not a fish, I wouldn't say that shade is making fish be weary. They love shade. Like that's part of their like biology, to ambush out of shade all the time. But I definitely think they know you're there. Once they see the boat, they know you're there. And the bigger ones, I will say that the bigger ones know it's the boat. Like you're not going to get a bunch of chances on jerkbait fish, schooling fish, or anything like that see the boat. You got to leave those fish and come back.
Now, another question that we have for a Patreon supporter, he wasn't able to make the show. Remember, guys, all Patreon supporters get their questions answered. Is how do you triangulate and stay on offshore cover without forward-facing sonar? And I asked him specifically if it was just forward-facing sonar or any electronics. He said specifically without forward-facing sonar.
Okay, landmarks. So boats are frictionless. You are moving every single time you look down and look up. You have moved inches away from where you were just at. It's just part of the deal. I think once you get your sea legs, like you just kind of forget that. Live scope obviously helps with that. But what I would tell him to do, which I have a trip on Friday where I'm jumping in a client's boat. He does not have front-facing sonar, and he wants to go striper and crappie fishing. Well, when we go crappie fishing, I'm bringing out 2 buoys for when we graph over on 2D and show him what a brush pile looks like, that we're going to use buoys as reference points to that. So how I liked to do it in the past was I would specifically look for something on the bank in front of me and behind me. And then I would throw a buoy 10, 12, 15 feet to the left or right of where I was casting. So this time of year is a good time to do it with the fall colors that are changing, because it's nice to reference like, hey, okay, I'm lined up with the red changing tree in the background and this specific dock behind me, and kind of use that as a triangulation of figuring that out. And then also what I would do is I would make a mental note, or I would even put it in my phone of, okay, I went over that pile. The top of that pile comes up to 8 feet, because I don't want to, without forward facing sonar, I don't want to throw, let's say a Demiki rig. Well, if it's a 3/4 ounce Demiki head, I only need to count 2 seconds before I need to start working that bait back, because I know the tip of it's in 8 feet. I didn't go, okay, well, that brush pile's in 21 feet. So I would make mental notes of like, okay, it's a 2 count and you're aiming at the red tree. That's just how you kind of do it. And then unfortunately, you just got to kind of risk it without front facing as far as how close you are. And you're going to want to fan cast. So if you go red tree, you're going to go 3 feet to the right, 3 feet to the left, 6 feet, 6 feet, until you feel like you're really getting an exact bearing of where that is. A good tournament to watch, like past tournament with that, is Polinick. I don't remember where he won, but he was deep cranking a bunch of brush piles. He specifically talked, this was years ago, dude. This had to be probably 6 or 7 years ago. I don't remember where that was, but he was talking about triangulating with landmarks on the shore. But yeah, that's how I did it. And we'll still do it to this day. I mean, live scope's extremely accurate, but sometimes I'm turning live scope, actually not sometimes, a lot of times I am turning live scope away. Will and I talked about it with tournament fishing a lot, and I'm at 120 feet. I haven't gone below 120 feet in probably 4 months. So I am making some serious long casts. And then I am turning the live scope to the sides every time after I cast.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I saw this on the Upper Potomac, and maybe because it's an old river, so it's really hard bottom with smallmouth. But the bigger ones, when I was Demiki rigging, it couldn't be underneath the boat, even though it was in like 25 or 30 feet of water. Mm-hmm. They would come off the bottom and then would spook. I'd have to do it away. And earlier in the year, when I was getting them on a spy bait, they get between like 70 feet, and it's just almost like they hit a wall and they just turn, and their body language completely changes. And it has got to be that.
Yep, it has to be. Yeah, I've been turning it away. So I've been going back to a little bit of like, okay, I know just from where live scope's lined up that I am aiming for, say, the red tree on the bank. And I'm just, if it's suspended fish, you really don't need live scope for suspended fish. The only time I really am leaving it on the piece of structure is if I'm chucking a jig into a brush pile, or I'm chucking a drop shot or a Ned rig or a shaky head or something like that into the brush, and I want to make sure it gets into the brush. But if I scan a point at 120 feet, 150 feet, and there's 6 bass that are in 8 feet, I just sling whatever bait I'm throwing with live scope facing right and making sure I'm not off that much, and I turn it to the side and just back to normal fishing. and it seems to me like it's helping maybe. I mean, that smallmouth that I caught today was 401 on the scale. I saw her on live scope and turned live scope away and made my cast, and she bit on like the 5th twitch. So
I really thought that question was interesting that my Patreon supporter brought up, because if you told me like triangulating with live scope, I'd be like, the most important piece of gear I got in college was the 0.1 antenna from Lowrance. And Garmin now I think has like steady cast, and it's so cheap, and no one talks about how important it is to make sure that your puck antenna is good, because that thing will line you up dead nuts on the thing every time, but it automatically devolves into forward facing sonar bad.
Yeah, the other thing too with fall transition into winter, let's say we get a big rush of fish going up to the bank here because we get a big heavy rain and stuff like that. I don't even turn live scope on. If I'm gonna go crank for the day because it's blowing 25 miles an hour, I'm not even turning it on. Or if I'm gonna go chuck a jig on shallow rock, like I don't need to see on live scope if there's fish on a 6-foot deep rock pile. I'm making 5 casts on it and I'm moving on. So this time of year is like a 50-50 of if I'm going to turn live scope on or not. And yeah, just in general, I mean, I think you and me are coming up on a year of doing the podcast and stuff like that. I mean, I've progressively added 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet to live scope, and I've definitely got into the habit of turning it away. So
that's interesting to see what this happens in any other year or two, because everyone has it now.
Yep,
so they're smart. They really are smart.
I mean, dude, I love offshore fishing and I love technology, but I also love my back and my ankle and my neck. And if it ended up where everyone got live scope, and I told John Cruz this like 2 years ago, I think it is going to push a ton of fish shallow. God, I would love it if you could just go back to just beating the hell out of the bank and catching 25 pounds.
Yeah, it always balances out. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to get into, and this is this segue here. Greg, you just want a gift card to Jake's Bait and Tackle. Again, if you guys would like to win something, just ask a question. Billy, could you comment on your rod and reel, tackle setup, and baits at this time of year?
Which one of the 25 that are sitting in the boat? All right. Greg, I don't know if I can answer that in one question. I'll just tell you in general on rods, my friend. I have been with Dobbins for 5 years, coming on 6. I have a big series on my YouTube of what rods I'm using, like just a real high level, like 3-4 rods of what I'm using at each specific time of year, each month. So you can check out that YouTube to get maybe a little bit more specific. But Dobbins rods are fantastic. They have multiple different series of rods, from your basic super entry level to $550, $600 ecstasy rods that are crazy sensitive and extremely well made. So that is the rods that I use. Reels, I've been a Shimano guy my whole life since I was a child. I don't use anything else. So depending on what your budget is, if you're an entry-level spinning reel guy, NASI 3000 is a fantastic reel. That's what I use for guiding. I never have problems out of them. If you want to get up into maybe the mid-range or more expensive, you can go with a Vanford or a Stella. And then a Shimano DC is very hard to beat, especially this time of year. Any sort of like digital braking reel is going to be important for slinging your smaller baits, like your smaller jerk baits, your wiggle warts, your lighter crank baits, to really help get it when it's windy too. You want to have something that's got a little bit more of assistance on the braking stuff, because backlashing when they're chewing is the worst possible thing that could happen, especially having to deal with it in the boat. So Shimano, Chronarchs, Corrado Ks, that's kind of their workhorses. If you want to get into the heavy stuff, you can buy Metaniums and try not to scratch them and resell them later. So that is rods and reels. Sunline is a sponsor as well that I use. Sunline Sniper, probably 80% of my line is Sniper. One that I'm going to talk about specifically is 7-pound Sniper. So what you want to get into is line diameter is extremely important to look at when you're looking at line. And the Japanese companies, so your J-Braids, your Invisex, your Sniper, your Assassin, all of the Japanese lines are going to have smaller or the smallest diameter line for the pound test. I'm sure Berkeley and Trilene and all those guys are not, they're probably the same at this point, but one of the biggest staples for Japanese line when it first came out was the line diameter for the pound test. So not a lot of companies offer 7-pound line. And if you feel like you're crappie fishing with 4 to 6, but 8 feels like a rope in these conditions, then 7 is like an awesome line to use as a leader.
Have you tried their new product that kind of takes away from fly fishing where the knot size is like 12, 15 and it tapers down?
Yep. I have not tried it yet. But one thing that I will be trying it with is Carolina rigs, because I hate Carolina rigs. And one of the reasons I do is I feel like I can never find the right line test from, say, like, do you go 20 to 16? Do you go 16 to 12? Is one supposed to be mono? Like, kind of this like whole dilemma to it, where if you're telling me I can tie a leader on that's 20-pound test on the end that I tie to the swivel and then it goes down to 12, then, and I have that just in that leader line as opposed to the connection knot piece, then maybe I wouldn't hate the Carolina rig as much. So no, it's an interesting concept as far as that. I feel like it will have its place for sure, but I've not tried it.
I've heard a lot about the FG knot lately. Like, it actually has weaker tensile strength than other knots when you, depending on how you actually tie it and how much strain you put into it, especially when you're dealing with 7, 8 or, lower pound test.
Yep. I don't know, dude. I tie the crazy Alberto. I was just saying in the boat today, like, man, I got to really work on the FG, just because going down to 5-pound line and even from 8-pound braid to 5-pound line, the diameter is pretty substantially different. I wrapped 12 times just to be sure, but it's catching a lot, even with the light line diameter. So going with the FG, but then I just get terrified that, the FG is just going to slip because 5-pound line is like less than floss as far as the diameter. So I'm going to be playing around with that a little bit more. 5-pound line is crazy in my opinion, and it does feel like crappie fishing, but it is going to get you more bites. So, but going to baits, is there any other question you want me to answer, or should I just start jumping into baits?
Roll for it. Roll it.
All right. Let's start with what we've talked about a bunch. Let's just start with Damiki fishing. So actually, let's not, because that's going to be more like, sorry guys. That's going to be more like that's going to be your late fall, like definitely more into winter. So let's talk about what's basically going to happen here in the next 10 days. So we're still in that low 60 range, maybe mid 60, like 63 if we get a hot day. There's still a little bit of topwater going on. They're missing the topwater a lot, so I'm putting it away. But it's still there a little bit, but you don't want to transition from a super aggressive bite like a chatterbait or a trap or a topwater to, okay, I'm going to go throw a 5-pound line with a 1-inch Damiki bait, tight lining a vertical wall. You just don't want to skip that far ahead. It may feel like that's how far ahead they are, but I guarantee you they're not that far ahead. So what I like to do with what we referenced earlier is check those ditches. Checking those things first thing in the morning, because that's where that bait is pulled back out. The number one thing I'm going to use, hands down, 85, 90% of the time is a jerk bait. So they're still really aggressive. The bait is still there. It's just dropped down a little bit. The only thing that you need to play with on your jerk bait, and you do need to play with it, so don't get lazy this time of year, is color and size. Depth, you need to figure out how deep they are on those drops. But for me specifically, Greg, for example, I have 4 jerkbait rods that are on the deck, and they all have different jerkbaits on them and different line sizes, so that if I go to a ditch that drops down and it's 17 feet and they're down to the bottom, that I can throw a +2 and get it down 14 feet to get their attention, where the next pocket I go to, it might only be a transition from 5 feet to 8 feet, and I need to throw like a darter that's only going 2 feet under the surface. So if you have the ability to have it, I would try to have at a minimum 2 jerkbait rods out. I would have a shallow running jerkbait, and I would have one of the deeper running jerkbaits. So the main ones that I am using, this should be no surprise to anyone, and I will say I have tried every jerkbait that's ever been made. I love jerkbait fishing. I would say it's a strength, is Megabass. They have it figured out. The weight transfer system makes casting these things super easy. Their color schemes are all dope. They come out with color schemes all the time. I'm not trying to just say go buy the most expensive one. Most of the jerk baits are good jerk baits, but Megabass just has it so dialed that it's just pretty stupid to not have a bunch of these in your boat. So with that, I did a little bit of Instagram story stuff with kind of some of the baits that I picked up from Megabass. Staple number one that everybody should have in their boat, 110. I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said on the internet 1,000 million gajillion bajillion times. This is, in my opinion, the best jerk bait that's on the market, has been on the market for years. So get yourself some 110s. They come in different varieties for depths, but this is kind of just an all-around start with a 110 in your hand. It's a big fish bait. It's also a limit fish type of bait, but get yourself a couple shad colors, get yourself a couple maybe unique colors that they have, and we'll jump into smallmouths a little bit, but putting 110s in the boat is super obvious. The one that I would jump from that, and this is where I have usually my setup with let's say I have 2 jerkbait rods on, is I'm going to have a +2 on 10 or 8 pound line. I can get that jerkbait down to 14 feet. It's a big profile jerkbait. That's going to tell me if those bigger ones down there want to eat something big or not. The other one that I'm going to have is going to be split between 2 different jerkbaits. The first one is just going to be a 110 junior. So it's just a shorter bait. This is a +1. It's just going to be a smaller profile bait. Don't make this hard on yourself. They're going to want one or the other, or one of these other jerk baits. All you have to do is just play with the size until they tell you what they want. But they're eating jerk baits this time of year. It's just a staple. It's just like throwing a shaky head in this, or a Cinco in the spring. Like, it should be in your head that it's that generic of a, or that textbook of a bait. So 110 +1 is on my other rod. If this is too big, then I'm going to kind of the smaller ones that Megabass provide. This is a darter, so it's a 2-hook, and I know some guys are anti 2-hook jerk baits, but hopefully you guys can tell just from the size of this thing, this is just like a chicken nugget. This is just a morsel of a meal for a fish. It's got a taller profile, so it's going to look like a bulkier meal for some of these fish. It's called darter for a reason. It's got a little bit different of a bill. It's got a little bit of like a scoop in the middle right here. This thing is insanely erratic. So if you're talking about, a windier day in the fall transitioning, you want sporadic as you can get, this is the one to go to, because this thing is whipping around like crazy. The other 2, and these are ones that I just started messing with this fall, but I already made a massive order, is the Nanahan. So when we get into very clear conditions, really having to match the hatch, really making sure that you're around the same bait size. This thing has just been super dope. For anybody that's on Instagram, I cracked a couple good ones with it. I've been fishing with a lot. This one's already rashed up. They have this in a +2 bill. That's Megabass's +2 bill. I am fishing this on a spinning rod with 7-pound sniper, and I'm getting this thing down 14 to 16 feet. That's not weighted hooks. That's nothing. So you could wrap lead wire on these, and you could get this little jerkbait probably down to 20 feet, which is insane. And that's going to be a huge player here in the next probably couple weeks when they pull out from that shallow, flat stuff we talked about into those ditches. As they progressively go out deeper, if you can get a jerkbait down into 20 feet, those fish are going to crush it. They just don't see that many jerkbaits. There just aren't that many jerkbaits on the market that can get 20 feet deep. So
we're going to go down a rabbit hole real quick. With shallow jerkbait, I'm very crazy with how many colors I have.
Yep.
The deeper you go, are you more like a deep diving crankbait where it's like a couple of colors and that's it, versus a shallow crankbait where you can have 32 flavors of the sun? Like, what is your breakdown of colors?
Yeah, I keep it pretty basic once I'm 15 feet deep. I just don't think light penetration, well, I shouldn't say keep it super basic. Did I ever send you that video that I saw on Instagram that was like some kid put all these highlighter colors on a hanger with a GoPro and dropped it down. So it's not that you lose color, you lose vibrance. So I would pay more attention to flash versus not, or muted colors versus not, because especially in these water conditions, this thing at 15 feet has enough flash on it that they're still seeing flash. They're probably not seeing the vibrant purple and like kind of that, like, I don't know, whatever that paint job is that looks like it should be on like a Chrysler 300, but whatever that paint job is where it's like holographic, I think they're still seeing that flash down that deep. But no, it's not going to be as much shallow where it's like, okay, they're 6 feet deep and they can see everything. So I will piggyback on your comment on color, because we're going to talk about smallmouth a little bit too. I started cracking them a little bit today and they're around. Smallmouth hate this. I don't know what it is about smallies and chartreuse and purple and a little bit of orange right there on the belly. This is a great color. I've got full chartreuse ones. I've got strawberry colored ones. I've got crazy wacky, elegy bone, chartreuse on the bottom, clear in the middle. Like, smallmouth hate bright colors and they are vision eaters. So if there is a plus side to this water being this clear, is if you can get out there on even a little bit of a breeze on Smith, on the lower end, mid end, halfway up the rivers right now, and there's smallies around, if there's a little bit of a breeze, they are not messing around. I had two that T-boned these jerk baits today that I had to like do surgery to get them out of their face or out of their throats. So have those colors, and this would be the time of year and the situation where if you don't feel comfortable throwing the weird ones that you bought at Bass Pro, or you want to try these weird colors, this is the time to do it for the next 4 weeks.
Do you change the hooks out at all?
I do. So I changed them to Gamakatsu Nanos, nano trebles for the most part, or just like a Gamakatsu round bend. It seems like on the spinning rod, I didn't change them out on the Nanahan just out of pure laziness. It seemed like on the spinning rod, I didn't really have issues with bend outs or anything like that, but I'm throwing it on a 7.6 spinning rod. So it's just, I mean, dude, it's got 5 guides of tip. Like, the whole thing just bends. It's such a wiggle stick that it's like, okay, because your hooks are bending out because you don't have the right rod. You're over leveraging the rod to the size of the wire of the hook. So maybe to go back to Greg's question super quick on rod, guys, each company, no matter who you go with, should have a general description on each rod of like their speciality. So Dobbins has 2 or 3 jerkbait rods that are specifically tapered for jerkbait fishing. They have a 610-4, which is their jerkbait special. I throw my shallower ones on a 684 and then a 704 CB. Those are the staple jerkbait rods that they have that are designed for you to not bend out hooks on jerkbaits. The 684 feels like a piece of a reed. Like, it's the most wiggle stick rod I have in all of my rod arsenal, but you can get a bite on that thing and bend that thing into almost a full C, and those fish won't come unbuttoned. So
It's freaking crazy. When it comes to retrieve, the jerkbait one I get asked a lot about too. Probably you do. And
Yep.
it's such a weird question to ask, I guess, in my mind, 'cause it's like you just change it up until they eat it. But is there a more nuanced way to approach it, or is that pretty much the right answer?
generally faster now, going into slower. And when we say slow, and I'm sure Thomas, you and me will get on in January or whatever, and we can talk. Slow is like 30 seconds between your pauses. And I have had to fish them that slow. Fast is 5 jerks and a millisecond pause, 4 jerks, 3 jerks, 5 jerks. And the nice thing with live scope, if you hate it or you don't, one of the things that makes it awesome is you can find out in about 3 points how fast you need to work a jerk bait for them to react to it correctly, as opposed to if you don't, you're just going down the bank until you figure it out. So it might take you an extra hour to figure out how fast the jerk bait needs to be, where live scope, you're watching their biology and you're watching their body language right away, and they're telling you, slow it down, get it deeper. Like that, you will see that from live scope right away. So generally, yeah, start faster this time of year. And sometimes, guys, on a windier day right now, with the water still being mid 60, but them chasing a jerkbait and eating it, you don't even need to stop it. You literally work it as fast as you humanly can, and they will crush it. I deal with this with guide clients sometimes on like how fast or slow they work a bait, like if they're really not new to fishing. And a lot of comments are, well, how do they catch up to it, or how do they get it? And it's like, no, your human eye can't even see how fast they're moving. They will be able to get your jerkbait even if you are reeling and twitching at the same time as fast as you literally can on your shoulder. They will come up and crush it.
100% there. And the one thing I even realized with scope this year, sometimes you put too much slack in your line between pauses. And I realized that where they were just hitting that thing so freaking light. And it was because I had so much slack in between where and I was doing a smallmouth where if I would twitch, but almost keep my line tight in between, I could feel that mush of them actually having it in their mouth. But this is just a pro of having forward facing sonar where if I didn't have it, I would think like, yeah, no jerkbait. I'm going to move away for something else.
So here's the number one tip that I give clients that come for jerkbait trips now and in the spring. I bet you I catch 8 out of 10 jerkbait fish that follow my jerkbait now, as opposed to when I first got live scope or didn't have live scope. If you have, let's say you have 3 fish on a point and you throw your jerkbait, 2 of them come up, 1 stays down. The 2 take turns. I guess I'll have to do it this way. The 2 take turns coming at the return of your jerkbait. If your jerkbait and the fish connect and it looks like that fish is basically laying on top of your return of your jerkbait, set the hook. I have caught so many more fish here, top of the head, under the mouth. Those fish have that jerkbait way more often than we think they don't. We just don't feel it because you're putting that second pause. There's too much slack. They're closing their mouth on the jerkbait. And as soon as you go to pull, they're just opening. And so for me, what I'm doing a lot with the jerkbait is if I can get them close enough to it where it looks like they're basically laying on top of it, I'm catching way more jerkbait fish than I have in the past. The last 2 years, I've just been doing that very methodically with setting the hook when I don't feel any pressure. I don't feel a line jump. I don't feel mush. I don't feel anything. I just set the hook when the return shows like that, and I'm catching a lot more fish.
And then we have our next person that just asked a really good question. You just want a gift card to Jake's Bait and Shackle. J.R. Mitchell, number 5 hooks.
Yes.
Using your bait?
Yep. Number 5s, and number 6s. If I want to go down even smaller. So
what's your next thing you got for us? And then while Billy's getting the next bait, for all the winners that just won tonight, just email me, fishingdmv@gmail.com, Instagram, Facebook, get a hold of me, and I'll get you that card.
Cool. All right. So next couple baits that are going to deal with that ditch situation, and then we're going to transition to kind of the rock stuff, is swim baits. So especially with clearer water too, you got to get away from big baits like chatterbait. You could probably still throw a trap, but again, I'm trying to get away maybe from like really obvious, big, loud type of baits and trying to go a little bit more subtle with the clear water that we have. Again, this is another mega bass deal. You can throw whatever swim bait head you want. You can throw a straight ball head for all I care. That's totally awesome. But at the same time, when we're pressured this late into the year, you do want to try to change it up a little bit. And so we're talking about this Okashira head. It's just something different. It's something that they don't see a lot. A lot of guys aren't going to go spend the extra money for this. It's got a good keel to it, which is important on a swim bait head. Because when you're reeling slow in the fall, you want to have that little side to side, because as those minnows are swimming, they're not swimming straight like this, and they're not swimming wide. They're just swimming really tight shimmer like this. And so a nice keeled swim bait like that head is going to provide that. The blade is going to be a little bit of a flash. So maybe you're going with the blade on the Okashira when you're throwing during like blazing sun type day, because you're getting a little bit of water movement and you're getting a little bit of that sun flash, and then go with just kind of the regular one without the blade. They're just really well made. They're good detailed. The hooks are crazy sharp. You can do it you can literally throw whatever you had. Dobbins has a great jig head that I throw all the time, but if you're talking about little swim baits, this is just the high-tech Easy Shiner. 3-inch spark shads are good. anything that's in that like 3-inch range is what you're going to want to do. I would tell you start transitioning away from Kitech. The Fat Swim and Impact is meant to be a big tail movement, a really big water disturbance. And as that water gets colder, you want to continuously work down on a tighter wobble to match what the bait's doing so that your stuff's not super obvious that it's a bait. So, for example, that Kitech Easy Shiner, you guys can see, it's just a skinny profiled bait. So this on 6-pound line is just finesse to the max. So,
I mean, it's basically a spy bait without treble hooks. The same action is the way I look at it.
Yep, same action. So that's a solid way, or that's a good transition spot in those drops. And then also you just have different weight sizes. So you could have a heavier head on for out those on those deeper ones, or you could have a light one. Me this time of year, and as we transition into winter, you're going to want to continuously get that bait down, down, down. But this time of year, you do want to keep these up high in the column. For example, we were talking about the seagulls. Bass and stripers are pushing the bait up. Seagulls are pushing the bait down. It's this constant nature battle of like, where's the bait going to end up? So most of the bait is mid column or higher. So it's not natural for you to be throwing this and dragging it down on the bottom when the bass are looking up. They're looking up this time of year. They want to chase the bait down. They're aggressive. They're putting the feed bag on. If you see schoolers out there, suspended fish, always have this above their head, never below them. You're going to rarely get bites if you're reeling through them and underneath them. Piggybacking with that, going into kind of like crank-ish type of deal, this is going to be something for both that transition ditch, also to vertical fishing, but that's a Demiki vault. People refer to these as blade baits. This is pretty old school. Silver Buddy is like what our grandpas threw, literally just like ironed out or like slammed down some iron and added some weight. Like, again, doesn't need to be a super fancy one like a vault. It can be your Silver Buddy, but Demiki's got some cool colors on this. These come in a lot of different sizes, but this is your variation to say like a rattle trap. Different vibration sound. It's not bead vibration. It's just bait vibration. It's heavier for the most part, and it's something that you can vertically fish and just reel through. So for me, I'm doing 3/4 ounce ones for the most part because I want to get down to where those fish are as fast as possible. But this is a bait that's going to be on the boat basically from now through February. And just depending on where the bait is and if those bass are in those void balls versus that ditch, this would be one. So this is kind of a crankbait. But then I will transition over to the crankbait stuff. There's really only 2 crankbaits styles that I'm going to have on the boat for the next 2 months. And for anybody that's local and knows me, I would say this is probably my favorite way to fish. I feel like it's probably my number one strength besides offshore stuff, and that is throwing a wiggle wort. So this is Midwest, Minnesota, river fishing, Lake of the Ozarks, like straight up Midwest staple type of bait. Why you should have this one on is what's referred to as hunting action. If anyone has seen a crawdad or watched a video of a crawdad on YouTube, they swim backwards. They swim very erratic and very fast. But what hunting action is it is referring to how far out the bait is swinging when it deflects off of stuff or when it is reeled in. And so the wiggle wort, the rock crawler, just crankbaits that kind of have this rounded body shape are going to have the best hunting action. On top of that, things that I like to do on the wiggle worts is I change out the split rings that they have for black split rings because I'm weird on my wiggle worts, and I feel like if they get a flash of silver, maybe that pulls that fish off of chasing that down. I take the ring off of where your bill tie is. I change the hooks to, again, those Gamakatsu nano hooks because that's a dull colored hook. And then I actually tie my wiggle worts with a loop knot. So what a loop knot is, and I'll show you guys when we're going to talk about the Demiki, and I doubt this will show up, but A loop knot is, does that show up maybe?
Kind of. Your skin's as white as your shirt.
So a loop knot, my friends, is essentially a fly fishing knot. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So a loop knot is a fly fishing knot that provides a free swing to a bait. And so the reason that you tie a loop knot on wiggle warts is it's going to exaggerate the movement even more. And when I say loop knot, I'm not talking about you need to tie like a 3-4 inch loop knot. I'm talking about just do like a 1 inch, 2 inch type of loop knot to it. But those are my modifications on a wiggle wart: is change your hooks, dole everything out. If you want to color these things up, I'll show you guys a custom painted one. It is literally just lawn shavings and a dirty diaper. So any sort of just kind of gross, muted type of bait is super important. Play with your colors a little bit as far as like maybe a hues of blue, purple, splash of orange. I don't really throw a ton of like really, really orange wiggle warts, maybe in the spring a little bit. But what you have to remember on the crawdad stuff is they are burrowing in the rocks in the winter. We're turning the corner where it's going to get cold enough that these crawdads have to burrow I don't know if they actively hibernate or if they just need to burrow in the rocks for warmth. But what is happening with the wiggle wart bite is those crawdads are up in those rocks, scurrying around in the boulders. On your windier days out here, the bigger fish are coming up because those crawdads, if it's 20-mile-an-hour wind beating into a rock bank, those crawdads are literally just like if you can imagine yourself in the ocean, even being a 190-pound dude, you can't keep your feet in the same spot. It's the same thing with prey type of deal in lakes. And so the wiggle wart is fantastic to imitate that. The other side of the spectrum from fall going into winter is the shad are going to go from being very erratic to very calm is the wrong word. But when they swim around, it's a lot less frantic and it's a lot tighter. And so one that I have really liked is the frit side. It's a nice bait that's weighted on the bottom, so it makes casting it super, super well. This bait is not designed to be burned in. This bait is meant to be slowly reeled in to bang into rocks, bang off of stumps, dock posts, all that sort of stuff. But the reason you guys want to have this in your arsenal, also similar to that swim bait, you can see any sort of flat side that's like this, it's going to create a very tight wobble to where when the bait's moving through the water, it's literally just moving about that much. And it's just enough flash to match what the minnows are doing through the water and match the hatch. So this is an important transition that you do not want to miss when you go from cranking to round-bodied shad style crankbaits to flat-sided. You want to make sure that these are in here. The other one that you're going to want to throw is a shad wrap. Again, that's tried and true as a Senko. Pick yourself up some 5s, 7s, and 9s, throw it on a spinning rod, and throw that thing around when that water temp starts to dip into the 50s, because that's the style that is going to get bit the most. Am I keeping rolling, or we got any more questions?
We have hella
questions.
We got hella questions. 2.8 is life.
Hey, Rich.
Scott Bowers. I bought a good amount. Just let him know. Billy, what tournaments are you looking to fish in 2024? You're going to try out for the elites, right?
Yeah, dude, it's just a phone call away. It sounds like I just need 150 grand to burn. So I will fish the BFLs again. I think I'm just going to cherry pick Smith, maybe jump in one at Kerr. We don't have nearly as many weddings booked, but I'm going to have a 1-year-old child, or not even a 1-year-old child. So couple BFLs, cats. Maybe I thought about jumping in big bass if it's like Norman, or I guess that schedule is out. I could take a look. Maybe just to like give myself a vacation and jump into something kind of different and unique. But probably just sticking close for next year. See what happens with the kiddo, and maybe win a little bit of cash if I can here.
Brew Tank, Billy is the man. Caught him in September on vacation with his help. The lake is awesome. Caught a PB yellow perch over 2 pounds. Wasn't trying. He also says definitely booking a trip next year. I know Big D. I saw Big D TV went down with his dad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that was awesome. It was fun to see his dad. His dad was a hardcore cat fisherman and like pond fisherman. So to have him like cast like a bunch of different lures, he's just like every fifth cast, he's like, "Am I doing this right? Is this look right? Am I doing this? Is this the right speed?" And I'm like, "Just trust trust the journey, brother. Trust the journey."
Trust the journey.
But yeah, he had a good time. So yeah, it was good to get them back down here. And yeah, I will say on him talking about the ring perch, I don't know if he caught that in Smith Mountain or not, but dude, I have been catching a ton of yellow perch in here, and they're not small. Like Minnesota, dude, if you caught like a 12-inch perch, you're like, it's going in the skillet, but two, you're like, okay, that's like a full grown one. Dude, I caught a 16-inch perch like a month ago. Wow. And I had a couple brush piles. They're gone now, but I had a couple brush piles in like 18, 20 feet that I thought were crappie. And I went back with like my like little crappie setups, jigs, and little blade baits that I have for crappies, and wailed on some like 13 to 16-inch ring perch.
That's
and it's got me thinking there's got to be bass eating them.
Because
if there's a population that big, there's yearling perch in here, and there's more in here than we think. So I may or may not have picked up a bunch of mega bass perch jerk baits.
I mean, you say that. That's another reason I think white plays is because of crappie, not just shad. Because again, you have that crappie spawn, and it's not just I don't know. That just dawned on me this past spring, where I had a bass that coughed up a crappie, like this massive 5+ incher. They still eat them.
100%. Most of the fish that you're catching around brush, I would tell you, are probably eating crappie or bluegills. If it's obvious there's a shad ball there, great. But if you pull up on a brush pile and there's 4 or 5 little fish swimming around and one big one, that thing's down there eating crappies or eating something like that. So
good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's keep the ball rolling here. Okay. Next page. And then, guys, as always, link in the episode description to everything we talked about today.
Okay. So let me talk about the crawdads one more time, just kind of like a different variation of baits. And then we're going to go into like, okay, this is what you guys are going to want to start doing as we transition like Christmas time and on. So another staple bait in the fall is a shaky head, especially with the clearing water like this. It's one you should have on your deck pretty much 12 months out of the year. For me, I do transition away from shaky heading a worm for the most part to shaky heading a craw. And that again goes back to the fact that we're getting close to that hibernation time for crawdads. So that's where I'm going to switch to something like this bait profile. So nice little compact craw bait. This is a Missile Baits Warlock head. And one thing I'll tell you guys on the Warlock head that they just updated that's really nice. But this right here is the Chunky D. Missile came out with it last year. Comes in a nice clamshell, but it's just a super nice, compact craw-style bait. You're throwing this on a spinning rod. You're throwing this normally, I would say, on 10 or 12-pound line, but I'm down to 7-pound line on my shaky head right now. But this is green pumpkin. Superbug's a good color. Straightforward fishing. It catches fish. It catches bigs. This is about the size of what I would say the crawdad are running around, this or smaller. And it's just a nice compact bait that works really well. The Warlock head comes through rock really, really well. Good Gamakatsu hook. But the main thing that I would say, and this is like a huge pet peeve of mine on shaky heads, is if it's a twist head like that, it needs to have this point. If it doesn't have this point, it's super annoying to put a bait on with just a spiral. Your bait almost never goes on straight. It comes out the side. Like as you're twisting a worm up, all of a sudden your bait's like halfway out the side on it. So having that extra pin, Missile just updated the Warlock head, so now all of them have it, is it gives you a good starting point for that bait to where it's going to thread on there perfect every time, and you're not burning plastics just to try to get it on there really nice. So shaky head would be kind of the other thing I would say that's just like the jerkbait fishing. I have 2 shaky heads usually on the deck, and all I'm doing is 2 different sizes. I'm usually just doing a 1/4 and I'm doing an 1/8. Just so I've got that heavy fall rate versus something that's super light, because fall rate can be important this time of year with the watercolor. Also, if they are really, really negative eating, you kind of have to drop something in their face super, super fast and don't give them too much time to look at it. So that is one of the plastics that I would be throwing. The other one is, I would tell you right now, most dudes are going to say, hell no, I'm never doing that. You're an idiot for showing me that. I don't even know why you would do that. Is a micro jig. Relative to my hand, this thing is tiny. So this is a Missile Baits micro football head, trimmed up, modified a little bit. This is a little mini D-bomb as the trailer, but this, it's got a tiny little hook to it. You guys can see that. So this, in my opinion, is one of the most ultra finesse things that you can be throwing any time of year. I have one on Smith Mountain with the non-football head version that was almost 6 pounds on this tiny little baby bait, and that other one's even smaller than that. So as you're transitioning from fall to winter, bait size is super important, like we talked about, especially in Clearwater. They're getting a good look. For all you know, a lot of the crawdads down there aren't as big as this Chunky D, and they want something more in that size range. And that can be a difference between getting bites and not. So the other thing that I would do as well is, if you guys do buy packs, you can pull weed guards and you can pull skirts off. So you can either customize this yourself, or you can turn this into just actual plastic on it. So this would be a situation where you just modify that that baby D-bomb, just make it, a very small little craw. You're talking like a Ned bait type of size, but you're getting a heavy weight out of that football head, crazy sharp Gamakatsu hook, and ultra finesse. So you're talking, I'm throwing this on like 6 or 7 pound line, 7.2 rod, 7.4 rod, something like that. But that right there seems like a lot of guys would probably question it, but I can tell you guys right now, like it will catch you a lot of fish this time of year, and it has no problem catching some giant ones.
When do you make the now, are you making the transition completely with your jig fishing to just that micro one right now? And then you got hella bass to get in the channel. Like, you guys are super serious. Yeah, it's my medication. It kind of makes me that way.
Yeah, I'm dead tired. What do you want to talk about, Rich?
Yeah, let us know. Yeah, I just think it's interesting about the whole jig thing, because there is a transition that happens, I think, twice a year when it comes to your size. And I mean, the guys up where I'm at on the Shenandoah and the Potomac, we're throwing hair jigs, like these micro custom tied things for smallies. So I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yep. No, I'm not transitioning fully over to a micro yet. I'm still throwing like a smaller head banger. I'm just trimming skirts a lot. So I'm not doing like a big skirt. I'm flaring it out quite a bit, and then I'm downsizing my trailers. So that's another thing for anybody that cares for Smith Mountain. If you go read my fishing report, this is the time of year where we want to transition, especially when you're fishing a jig out deeper, because you guys got to remember, if it's 61-degree water at the surface, if you're throwing a jig in 25 feet, it's 50 some degrees down there. You want to get away from like your grub style of jig trailer, something that's going to flap a ton when you move it, to something a lot more subtle. Excuse me, like a D-bomb or like a Zoom chunk or something like that. That's just kind of a single flat flapper. That's something that I'm doing on kind of my regular jig, is calming it down quite a bit.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I think, guys, we got one more gift card to give away from Jake's Bait and Tackle. So drop your question here in the comment section down below, and we'll get that answer as we're wrapping up here.
Cool. Let's go into the vertical style of fishing, or your bluff wall stuff. So like we talked about, they're going from the ditches out to the secondaries, going to the tighter contour lines, or specifically at Smith Mountain, there are a ton of treetops in this lake. It's ridiculous. It's also overwhelming. You basically have a whole second lake, in my opinion, during the winter, from what's around the bank, even out to say like 15 feet, to all of a sudden you could go fish treetops in 70 feet of water, and those treetops come up to 30. So it's like you have a whole nother lake to go approach. Take your time graphing, find the biggest, bushiest tree you can out of that row of trees, find them on good transition spots and good kind of contour lines. But this is probably one of my new most favorite ways to fish after Live Scope came out, and that is a Demiki rig. It is just fun to send something down into the deep abyss and have one slowly swim over to it. And just, I feel like when I watch it on Live Scope, like they're literally just like, yeah, like they're just kind of like falling into it. It's never really like a oh hell yeah type of bite. It's literally like, nope, I'm so cold down here and dark, and this could be something in front of my mouth that I'm just going to slowly swim up to it and slowly like suck it back in. And I have caught some monster fish out deep, starting Christmas time through February. So the Demiki rig, again, going the finesse style, guys. You guys can see this is a VMC Moon Eye. I have custom Demiki heads made. I have ball heads. I have darter heads. The head isn't necessarily as important as the bait, in my opinion. So this is a Demiki armor shad, and for what you guys can see, hopefully against my skin or whatever, this thing barely moves. Even me just kind of like moving it and then stopping it, the tail moves for a split second. You don't need to Demiki rig with anything that's this big S-wave type of bait. You're talking, you want subtle, you want something that's very manageable, that you can see on Live Scope. That's why I kind of use like a bigger style head. I also do like the actual eye on this bait. I do think if you're talking this water's this clear and it's a bright sunny day and you shoot this thing down to 25 feet, maybe they get enough of a view to where they're seeing that eyeball. But you're talking light line, vertical fishing. I tie a loop knot on my Demiki rig just to see if on the way down I can get any bites from it kind of shimmering a little bit better than just a straight knot. So having that side to side, but this is quickly becoming one of my favorite ways to fish in the winter, on like calm days when it's super, super tough and, you know, you could go throw a football jig or something like that. I'm very, very fond of this little guy. So that is Demiki Armor Shad. It comes in a bunch of different colors, different sizes. They have a 3, they have a 2.5, Z2s. There's a ton of different companies that have Demiki stuff at this point. One that I will kind of piggyback off of you, a TRD is not a bad choice. It's very subtle movement. There's really nothing going on, but it still fits the same profile of what that bait should look like. And then another one that I throw a lot of, which is quote unquote not supposed to be utilized, is Missile Baits has their Ned Bomb. This is a great shad profile. What you can also do to give this thing even a little bit more subtle action is you can actually take a pair of scissors and cut straight down the middle of this and give it a fork tail. But it's again, a little 3-inch morsel. You can rig it either vertical on the tail or horizontal. Both are going to be just fine, but it's all about just basically rigging it, keeping it super straight on your bait like that. And that's all Demiki fishing is. There's nothing crazy to it. Keep it as simple as you can with your bait choices, but that's another great little minnow style of bait to do the Demiki stuff. And then the only other bait that I really brought is what you're going to transition from once it gets cold enough here. Pray to God, there should be in the late winter or later fall transitioning into winter is we should get what's called a shad stun, which is going to be when these small shad, which they're getting decimated right now. A lot of bass, a lot of stripers, perch are eating them, crappies are eating them. Everything is basically eating that yearly size bait. Is eventually you're going to start going the opposite direction with your baits, which is bigger baits. They're going to run out of food that's that small. And so what you're going to go to is more in this like 4 or 5 inch style of swim bait. So I throw a ton of spark shads. I throw a ton of suicide shads, anything that's in that kind of swim bait that's more of just a mold, whale from Sixth Sense, something that looks a little bit more beefy than just say like the than just say this skinny shad profile. So ball head, triangle head, some sort of swim bait head transitioning into that. And then the only other like 2 baits that I brought that were sneaky, so I had a couple buddies say, hey, tonight, can you drop some sneaky stuff? This is something that I used to do in Minnesota a lot, and I catch a lot of fish here, is you get into kind of your weird Japanese baits. This is a Kitech leech. So super weird profiled bait.
It looks like something from adamandeve.com.
Yeah, it does. It looks like candles. So it doesn't even look like the bait's connected. I'll grab one out for you guys, but just a weird profile bait this time of year with how clear this water is, I think would be a good idea. So if you are into tackle or like being a tackle junkie, go to japantackle.com, look around the plastics, find something weird, hook up tackle. I mean, Tackle Warehouse has these things now and stuff like that, but having something that's just a little bit more unique can be killer this time of year. So you'd be doing like an octopus hook with this on a drop shot, and just kind of swimming that thing around.
That is goofy as hell. But I mean, people will catch it.
What it kind of looks like? It kind of looks like maybe what your sperm would look like.
They missed a golden marketing opportunity with that.
How's that, Rich? For We're Too Serious.
There's something interesting about like going with the sneaky baits and adjusting it, and I think that's what the Demiki rig has really done, because you do need live scope to make that really work well.
Yep.
Like, what do you do when the fish? What I saw, and this is something I don't have the experience that you do with it. When they rise up to it and they leave, how long do you give that fish where you bug out like you would anything else and go find a new set of fish?
If they bug out, then I'm gone. If they bug out and go back down away, this is how I've done better on Demiki fishing. No movement. Like, send it down to them, send it 10 feet in front of them, drop it down to where you can tell on live scope, they sense something is coming down, and then I don't move it. And then I'm doing the same thing. I shouldn't say don't move it. I'm doing a very similar thing to what I explained on the jerkbait fishing, that if I see that fish come over and the returns go on top of one another, literally all I am doing is like ice fishing, bro. Like the littlest flick. I mean, that thing's moving a 1/4 inch up, and that's when you'll feel them crunch down on it. And so for me, I'm not really moving I'm not doing this with my Demiki and moving it up and down and stuff like this. I'm shooting it down and I'm holding it completely still. Maybe every once in a while, maybe I'm doing tiny bit of this, but very, very subtle movements. And once they come to it and they're right on top of it on the return, I'm just giving it one more little snap. And it's like a 90% bite deal. If I can get them to come over and look at it and it's like they're smelling it, I can snap it that one time and get them to bite. Speaking of smell, I do have this right in front of me too. This shouldn't be a secret, but some of you guys might think this is some sort of weird secret.
Yeah.
So take your Demiki baits. Don't just put gulp in there. Take whatever baits you want and dump every possible plastic you want in there to stink. But for me, Demiki fishing, having it be in the gulp for a month seems to definitely get better bites, and convince a lot more fish. So force yourself to not be lazy, whether that's gulp alive or fill a Ziploc bag full of smelly jelly or whatever floats your boat on that stinky stuff, and just get that stuff. I would start soaking it now, honestly.
And we got Bart Trainer here. Bart, you just won a gift card to Jigs Bait and Tackle. Billy, how are you fishing the Demiki rig? Slow reel, vertical jigging. I think we answered part one of that question, but are you slowly reeling at vertical jigging? I'll add one more piece to that. Are you adjusting your forward-facing sonar to the down version so you have more view?
Good question. So slowly pulling it away from them, yes. Not a fast movement. So again, if one comes over to it, he's sitting right at it. Maybe you do the ice fishing deal. people do this a lot in ice fishing in Minnesota, is if you have fish come to your bait, you don't snap it up super far away from them. You lift it up away from them like this. So it's a hinge at your elbow, hinge at your shoulder. You're just lifting it slowly away from them. That is how I have had way better success than snapping it and trying to give it erratic action, is just let them kind of decide that all of a sudden they just want to make the mistake and eat it. Vertically jigging, I wouldn't say I'm directly on top of them, kind of like what you were talking about with your experience recently. I will get to that point, but I'm probably flipping the fish that are 25 to 40 feet out in front of sonar, penduluming it down to them to where when the boat moves forward, it pendulums down to where I'm maybe 10 feet in front of them before it comes to a complete vertical jigging situation. And then I do not do down. With the way I'm Demiki fishing, it's not a situation for me with down where like if you like I use down for like if I'm going fun fishing for stripers, just with like a spoon in the winter, because there's 700 of them together. So it's just like, okay, there's your spoon, like knock one in the face. With the tree deal or like a deep rock pile or something like that, I'm literally aiming for that one fish, and it's really weird with down to know where your bait's at and orient to where it's going to swing down and all that stuff. It's just easier to do it on front facing.
And Bart, one thing, a rookie mistake I made that you really need to keep in your mind is when you're staring at it and you're lifting, you have got to think about, you've got to stop at a certain point or you'll lift it so high. If you get bit, you have no real estate for the hook set. And it's just something I learned the hard way yesterday. You have to be subconscious about, like, I will only move the rod this far before I start reeling. Otherwise, you're really screwed when you get it up there. You have no way you can get a good hook into them.
Yep, 100%. Also, I would say this is a good kind of rod choice too, is you want a longer spinning rod for this. At least that's what I prefer. I'm going like 7.2 to 7.6 to get it away from the trolling motor, number one. But number two is sometimes you don't even really have to, if you're fishing 40, 50, 60 feet deep, you don't even really have to set the hook that hard. There's so much line out there that if you're lifting up and then you start reeling and there's any pressure, you can just reel and those fish they're done, because a 6.76 rod is going to bend over so much at that depth and vertically that it's basically setting for you. So I would honestly probably tell you, if you're having to go down, like sometimes I Demiki with 5-pound line, you don't want to set the hook that hard. You're just going to snap the line at your knot or that far down there. It's more of just kind of like building the pressure and letting the rod just kind of do it. Think like crappie fishing with a 12-foot cane pole. Those guys don't really set the hook. They just lift the rod up.
That's actually probably where it came from too, right? Like that whole idea of crappie fishing. We got two more questions, guys, as we wrapping this bad boy up. We have Justin here. What's a good swim bait for your drop shot?
So if you're going to do an octopus hook with just a swim bait on it, I think the profile is going to be the most important thing again. So the Kitech, something that's like a smaller profile. One that I've been playing with that's really skinny also, I just didn't grab out of the garage, is Mustad actually has swim baits. I don't know what they're called or remember what they're called, but I would tell you to focus this time of year on having a really, really slendered profile to your swim bait. So, Hasdong shad is another good one. It looks like a minnow. I would kind of say on the other side too, with Clearwater too, this is where me personally, I would rather have baits that have a little bit more shape to them than just mold. Because the fish are they're getting a crazy good look at it. So instead of throwing a ball head, maybe you throw something that's got an eyeball on it. Instead of throwing just a regular mold swim bait, you throw the 3-inch spark shad because it's got fins on the side. Maybe take that into account with how clear the water is to get your bait as close to looking like a actual piece of food.
Yeah, that's really true. I never even thought about that. The mercury of the water, it doesn't have to look perfectly correct. And I think that's where you look at like with swim bait fishing as we get there, especially like with a Huddleston and things like that. You have to be photorealistic when that fish can inspect it from a mile and a half away.
Yep, 100%.
Now we got one more question here. I'm like, I've got Scott Brower here. Let me get this one up here. Have you seen the, oh my Christ, Ozark rig? Okay, I can read. Have you seen the Ozark rig? It's like the hover style jig that you rig similarly to a shaky head.
No, let's look it up.
Well, that's like that hover rig thing that I'm trying to figure out a little bit more.
The core tackle one.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like is it rips the bait out, dude.
Oh, dude, elastic is what you got to use basically, which I don't like it for everything, but you don't go through as many baits.
So I have, but Fish the Moment has an hour-long video on the Ozark rig.
Good God. Guys, go find that out. Go to that video. Check that thing out instead. Probably a little bit more information on it.
Yeah, I will definitely take a look at it and see. I'm big into I'm big into playing with baits and stuff. I like messing with stuff. I'm looking at it. What the heck? It just looks like a Texas rig. It's like a flipping hook with a weight built into the hook. Interesting. I have not seen that, Scott. Looks like an interesting concept where it's getting away from the. It's getting away from. Yeah, it looks like it's getting away from the like throwing a Texas rig with a weight. It's more just weighting the hook. So, no, that's interesting. I have not seen that, my friend, but that definitely could be something to play with. That looks like what you would almost do with like swimming a swim bait down on the bottom, so it's Texas rig.
I've seen a hook like this before. It's used a lot for fishing hellgrammites and things like that on creeks and stuff because it has a gliding action versus going straight down, especially if you have a flat bait. And the picture I have, it has a beaver style bait, which kind of makes sense with the body design to get it to coast more. That is interesting. Yeah, Scott, thank you so much for showing that out there. Guys, Billy, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, link in the episode description to all of his social media, everything that he has going on in his life. Then also, guys, check us out on Patreon. We're only 55 subscribers away from hitting our first Patreon goal as we get closer and closer to creating our own nonprofit to where we can start helping out. A little spoiler, we have Jason Hallaker, who runs a smallmouth fish hatchery in Virginia. And we're going to be talking about that whole program and, what we can do to help. That's coming up too. What do you got going on?
Dude, anybody that wants to know about Smith Mountain, check out the fishing report. I've got links in there to my little bait shop deal on my website too. That's got bait specific. If Jake's doesn't have it or something like that, they can go to that. And dude, I'm just gonna fish as much as I can until the little babe comes and just kind of relax with the wife. So it's been a crazy year, man. I think I'm gonna do close to 175 trips. So yeah, remember when we first talked and I was like, yeah, this is gonna be like a 30 to 45 trips trip type of deal. So no, this is a full-time job now, my friends, and wouldn't have it any other way. It's blessed. I've had some great clients this year, some big fish, and it should be a good winter. So if anybody wants to learn that winter stuff, like we talked about, like Demiki fishing or really using their electronics a little bit more, now's a good time to hit me up and try to get some dates if we can get some cold weather coming up. But check out the site, social media, and support that way. And people need to get on your Patreon, man. We need to get more fish in these smaller waters.
That's the plan. They're doing a good job right now with all the big stuff, but we really need to help out the little lakes around us as well. But guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Link in the episode description again to everything we talked about, and we'll see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye.
Thanks,
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your